Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today we'll be discussing the importance of standing up for Israel and the Jewish people north of the border in Scotland. Warm welcome to the programme. My guest for today's programme is Sammy Stein from Glasgow Friends of Israel. Sammy, welcome back onto the programme. You're here to discuss Israel advocacy up in Scotland.
Thank you very much, Simon, for asking me to come down again. And I'm delighted to be here and tell you about some of the things that have been happening in Scotland in general, but in Glasgow in particular. And I think we've got some interesting information to give our viewers today.
Fantastic. Now, I think you're on about almost a year ago talking about celebrating the first anniversary of Glasgow Friends of Israel. Can you share with our viewers what's happened in the past year and how your organisation is going from strength to strength and that you're winning back the streets of Glasgow for Israel?
Well, we've now been on the street for 2 years, almost 2 years, over 2 years. We had our birthday in July. And we have been in Glasgow city centre almost every Saturday for 2 years. And the size of our group is growing all the time. And the number of people we talk to is growing all the time because people are very interested in what's happening in the Middle East because they don't know enough about the background, about the history. All they know about is what they hear on the news and read in the newspapers. And what we try and do is put some information to them so they understand the background, the history, and how we got to where we are today.
So, Sammy, share with us what your store would consist of.
Well, it's sort of developed over the last couple of years. So we have a sort of small gazebo, and on the gazebo itself we have a number of banners that explain some of the background to Israel and where Israel is geographically, and in fact the size of Israel compared to all the Arab countries in the Middle East and North Africa. So many people think that Israel is this enormous giant state, super state, and when they see it on the map, they really can't believe that it's such a small area in the Middle East.
And how have you been able to change the public's perception of Israel?
Well, firstly, it's worth mentioning that we have a stall in the city centre and we're surrounded by 3 other stalls which are all pro-Palestinian. And people tend to visit both our stall and some of the other stalls as well. And what we find is that if people go to the Palestinian stalls and they don't agree with what the people say there, they just tell them to go away. They swear at them, they're very rude to them, and they tell them to go away. When they come to us and they don't agree with us, we welcome them because it's great to speak to people who agree with you, but it's much more effective from an advocacy point of view to speak to people who don't agree with you, and you try and come to some agreement with them to explain what you're standing for, they can explain what they're standing for, and hopefully you come to some sort of agreement. And so we stand in the street, we don't stand inside the gazebo, we stand in the street, we give them leaflets, we smile at them, we invite them, and very often they come into the stall and they speak with us, and it's a great experience. One of the other things we do, which is quite unusual, we have, in addition to the banners that we have an Israeli flag, of course, but we've also got some bunting. And the bunting is made up of an Israeli flag and a Palestinian flag. So we actually display both flags on our stall. And when most people walk past that, they don't quite understand it. How could you have 2 flags on the same stall? Nobody else has that. So from their point of view, you either have to be for one side and against the other side. But that will never bring peace. That will never bring reconciliation. So we are standing there and advocating for peace for both the Israeli and the Palestinian people, because you can't have peace for just one side. And people are very surprised and they welcome that type of approach.
Excellent. So if you see Sammy and his team in the streets of Glasgow on a Saturday afternoon, go and say hello. I think it's great what you're doing because you're out there with the public, you're talking and engaging with people as they're doing their Saturday shopping. Can you share maybe one experience that you've had where you've had a conversation and that's had a profound impact on someone that you've spoken to about Israel that has changed their perception?
There's a story I've told before, but many people wouldn't have heard this story. One Saturday, most of the people we speak to are actually Scottish. They're not Palestinians, they're not Arabs, they're actually Scottish. And in Glasgow, as you probably know, there are very many pro-Palestinian people, and they have every right to be pro-Palestinian, that's fine. So one of them once came up to our stall, and he was incredibly angry at seeing our stall in the middle of Buchanan Street. And he arrived and he started speaking to Vicky, my wife, and he was so angry, she didn't really know what to do with him. So she brought him up to see me. And I tried to understand exactly what his issue was. And he said that he didn't believe there would never be any peace between the Palestinians and Israelis. And I said, why is that? And he said, because Israel will never give up any land. Never, ever give up any land. What are we going to do about the occupied territory and about the illegal settlements? And I said, well, hopefully, one day, the two sides will sit down together and they will talk about peace, they will negotiate, they'll come to some sort of agreement and solution. And he said, Israel will never give up any land whatsoever. And I said to him, do you know that in 1979, Anwar Sadat, who was the president of Egypt, signed a peace treaty with Israel, and he came to Jerusalem, and he came to the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, and he signed a peace agreement with Menachem Begin, who was a very extremist right-wing politician, as many people know. And as part of that agreement, Israel handed back the whole of the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt. Despite the fact that there were settlements in Sinai, there was even a city called Yamit, which was quite a big city in Sinai, and all the Israelis were repatriated back to Israel. And he said, I don't believe you. You're just telling me lies. I don't believe you. I said, I'll tell you what, go home tonight and Google it, and come back next week and we can talk about it. And he said to me, you bet I'll come back next week. I'll come back next week with all my friends to see you. I said, well, that's fine. And sure enough, the following week, I could see him walking down from the top of Buchanan Street towards our stall. And he was walking with three of his friends, and they all had big, huge Palestinian flags around their shoulders. And he walked right up to me, he put out his hand and he said, I've come to apologize. I've come to apologize because what you told me last week was true. I didn't believe you. I looked it up, and it's absolutely right. And from that moment on, he actually came back to see us more than once, and we had a very good relationship. And we now talk about the Middle East and the peace in the Middle East. And that's just one example of the kind of conversations we have at the stall.
That's fantastic. It's a really wonderful story, that one, Sammy. Can you also share with us as well the extent of the opposition, as we know that the Scottish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, for example, has made a lot of the news headlines for negative reasons in recent months? Well,
for the last 2 years, there's been a trial in Glasgow Sheriff Court, of the leader of the Scottish PSC, somebody called Mick Napier, and one of his lieutenants. They've been on trial following a demonstration, a very aggressive, violent, loud, intimidating demonstration in a shopping centre in Glasgow. And this was a demonstration against a small Israeli company called Jericho, who was selling beauty products from the Dead Sea. And I might add, from the Israeli part of the Dead Sea, not any part of the Dead Sea that was potentially part of Jordan before the Six-Day War. And there were about 20 of these individuals in this shopping mall. And the main guy, Mick Napier, the leader of the Scottish PSC, was marching up and down, screaming and shouting at shoppers, screaming and shouting at the people on the stall, saying things like, don't buy stolen goods. These goods are stolen from Palestinians. Don't buy them. These people believe in mass murder. These people believe in genocide. And he did this for about 2 hours. And as you can imagine, it wasn't a very pleasant experience, either for the shoppers or for the people working behind the stall. Eventually, he was arrested. and he was arrested and charged with something called aggravated trespass. And it took quite a while for the trial to start and for the trial to finish. And recently the trial was finished, and McNapier was found guilty of 2 charges. One was aggravated trespass, and one was refusing to carry out police instructions to leave the site. He was charged also with something called racial aggravation, and he was found not guilty of that. And he's now portraying that as a victory. He's saying, I wasn't found guilty of racial aggravation, so I must be a good guy. It's the only person, it's the only organization that I've ever come across who are boasting about the fact they were found guilty on 2 charges, as they were. So McNapier, this is the second time he's been found guilty this year in court, so he has a criminal record. And his friend, his buddy that was with him, also has a criminal record. And that's been a huge breakthrough as far as we're concerned, because it proves exactly what these people are about. They're about hate, they're about intimidation, they're just vile individuals working with a vile organization, and they've been found out.
So let's have a look now at Mick Napier, the leader of the Scottish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, talking to the camera outside an Israeli event.
My name is Mick Napier, and I'm chair of the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And we have been heavily involved in the Don't Dance with Israeli Apartheid campaign since these guys, Batsheva, one of the brand Israel assets, came to the Edinburgh International Festival in August. They came there for 3 nights, and we organised a protest against them every night. Hundreds of people and protesters inside throughout each performance. We think it's really important to respond to the Palestinian appeal for boycott. Boycott economically, politically, but also culturally and sporting boycotts as well. Because that's how we can do 2 things. We can send a message to the Palestinians inside the ghetto walls, inside their atrocious prisons, the biggest open-air prison in the world. We can send a message to them that in terms of world public opinion, it's not they who are in prison, it's Israel that's isolated. In the court, the only court that counts, the court of world opinion. And we can also send a message to Israelis that they cannot continue like this, committing the crimes without paying an increasing price. And that price is going to be isolation. They're a pariah state, they're a polecat state, and even though the elites in country after country support Israel in its criminality, in almost every country in the world, I would say, the great majority of the population are deeply suspicious of Israel. I said I think, but actually this is borne out in many opinion polls consistently over years. There was one famous opinion poll carried out by the EU in 2006. 59% of people in countries right across Europe considered Israel to be a serious danger to world peace. And its unpopularity has increased ever since. During the massacres in Lebanon in 2006, the massacres in Gaza in 2008, and the recent massacres and the ongoing massacres, Israel's popularity, Israel's prestige, I should say, is absolutely rock bottom. So we're here, we represent majority opinion, we're absolutely sure of that. And I think it's an honour, it's a tribute to the people of Leicester that you can hear the noise that so many people have turned out to stand up against Israeli apartheid. There'll be a number of people in Leicester who need to ask themselves, people of my age, what did they do against South African apartheid? For the great majority, the answer was nothing. But now in Leicester, there's a large number of people who have taken a position of opposition to Israeli apartheid. They can be proud when victory comes.
It's very easy to make those accusations without backing them up with facts. 3 things he mentioned there which concern me. Sammy, the first thing is described Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 2006 as a massacre, as well as Gaza as well. But we know the truth. We know that in 2006, it was Hezbollah that fired rockets and missiles into Israel. They captured 3 Israeli soldiers in Israeli territory. And then also we know that, for example, in Gaza, Hamas is the Islamist terrorist organization, Hamas, that's controlling Gaza, that fired rockets and missiles into Israel and even prepared terror tunnels to kidnap Israelis. So what are you supposed to do when 2/3 of your nation is paralyzed with rockets and missiles? Particularly that summer in 2006, because I remember it very well, that almost the entire Israeli population in northern Israel had to move to the south, and many were living in tents on the beaches of Tel Aviv because the situation with Hezbollah rockets was so bad. But I don't see that Mick Napier saying anything about that.
Well, I don't take Mick Napier seriously, Simon. I've seen Mick Napier in action many times, and it's toxic. Every pore in his body is oozing hate. He's a hateful individual. He does nothing for the Palestinians. You listen to that tirade that you just gave us. What does that do to help the Palestinians? Nothing, absolutely nothing. He's an Israel hater through and through. His organization is anti-Semitic. His organization is full of Holocaust deniers, and that's exactly what they are. And he is the head of the organization, and he is the one that actually leads them. Now, one of the things I'd like to say about Napier from the trial,
Of course.
he was looking forward to the trial. He wanted to go on the witness stand and explain his motivation for what he was doing. Now, it was interesting because when he wanted to say something that he wanted people to hear, he came out with all this information, all these stats, showing how smart he was and all the things he knew. But when he was asked a question he didn't want to answer, all of a sudden he became, well, you know, I'm 70 years old now, and my memory is going, and I can't really remember very much, and I'm only a lay person, so how can you expect me to know the ins and outs of the law? You bet he knows the ins and outs of the law. And he's carefully over the years tried to stay on the right side of the line, but not anymore. His arrogance has taken him over that line. And there's no doubt in my mind that he will do that again. And sooner or later, he will be found guilty of more serious charges. So there's no point listening to what he says on that kind of interview because it's empty, it's meaningless, and it's hateful.
Also, we see that John Mann, MP's got involved as well. I see this from the Jewish News as we're recording this programme because he's the chair of the All-Parliamentary Group on Anti-Semitism. And his actual words are, he says that there is an urgent need for action north of the border to put the racists back in the box, and said there is a direct link between the Scottish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign and anti-Semitism in Scotland. What are your thoughts on these developments now that the excellent John Mann, Labour MP, has got involved?
It's not only John Mann, but recently there's been a report produced by a well-known activist called David Collier. And the report was actually published by the Jewish Human Rights Watch. And it's 160 pages of pure anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial by members of the Scottish PSC. David goes through in detail identifying and showing the kind of stuff that these people are putting on social media. And there's no doubt about it, it's got nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestine conflict. It's pure anti-Semitism. It's pure Jewish hate. And these people, this is what they believe. Now, the SPSC have a banner that they like to show that says, anti-Semitism is a crime, anti-Zionism is a duty. By their own words, therefore, by saying that anti-Semitism is a crime, they've admitted that many of their followers who man their stalls, many of the followers that go to demonstrations are anti-Semitic and therefore are criminals. They are mixing and working with criminality and people who hate Jewish people. Nothing to do with the conflict in the Middle East.
So also, it also has problems for them as well. Don't they fall foul now of the new international definition on anti-Semitism that equates that if you state that Israel essentially is a racist state, then that falls into that category of being anti-Semitic, which Theresa May government adopted last October. So this has serious implications for what they can say and what they can't say. But how are, I remember going to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. There was a Shalom Festival last year in Edinburgh. And I remember seeing the big demonstrations there against Israel, and we'll show a clip of that shortly. But they were shouting there that, and I hear this constantly at anti-Israel rallies, that Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. Now, surely that's an incitement to genocide.
Well, absolutely, because even when you listen to these Israel haters and you ask them what do they mean by from the river to the sea, they don't actually know what it means. You say to them, well, which sea are you talking about? Are you talking about the Mediterranean Sea? Are you talking about the Red Sea? Are you talking about the Dead Sea? Which sea are you talking about? And which river are you talking about? And they don't know. To them, it's just a saying that they've been told to shout. And when you ask them about it, they don't know what they're talking about. But of course, if you do understand, it's really the area between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea that they are claiming that should be Palestine. And as far as they're concerned, and they've said this many times, as have some Arab leaders, no Jews will be allowed to live in Palestine. So if Palestine is stretching from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea, by definition, Jews will not be allowed to live there. They have to be annihilated. They have to be removed. And that's absolute genocide.
So why are we not seeing the police take strong action on this? Why are we not seeing the government take strong action? Because, you know, these are chants of incitement to genocide. Because I think the authorities have been slow at trying to charge these people. And it's this new definition, the anti-Semitism definition, and I think it's the purpose of the British government to do something about it. Now, recently, the Scottish Parliament has also adopted this definition, much to the annoyance of the pro-Palestinians, Israel haters. So in Scotland, this has now also been adopted as the definition from anti-Semitism. And we are hoping that over the next few months, we will see the police take much firmer action than they have done in the past with regards to the kind of things that these people are saying out in the public arena. And I really am confident that they will do something about it. And what is the response from the Scottish Government to this new report that's been published that John Mann has actually quoted and many others are quoted from, that looks into the problem of anti-Semitism within the Scottish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign?
Well, I think most people can't actually believe that this could be true. And this is why the David Collier report, the Jewish Human Rights Watch report, is so critical, because it has graphic examples of information that is posted by the members of the SPSC onto social media. And there's cartoons, there's messages, there's pictures, there's prose, there's text, which is all anti-Semitic and all based on how they hate the Jews. And there's no way that could be avoided. Now, the chair of the Scottish PSC, Sophia MacLeod, who's actually Mick Napier's girlfriend, the chair said that they are not inclined to take this report seriously. I ask you, a report over 160 pages showing anti-Semitism on every page, they are not going to take it seriously. Well, I'll tell you, Simon, every decent human being, when they see that report, they will be taking it seriously, regardless of what the SPC do with it. And they are in a corner, they are retreating, and they are going to lose over time because they are just pure haters.
I mean, I always find it very interesting that many of those, either in the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign or north of the border in the SC group, never ever really discuss the persecution and discrimination of Palestinians living in Jordan, living in Syria, living in Lebanon, living in Kuwait or some of the Gulf states, and how they even considered third or fourth-class citizens. And even in Iraq, for example, when ISIS was at the height of its power, we saw that they were trying to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians.
And what does that tell you about the SPSC? They don't care about the Palestinians. They don't care that the Syrians have killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. They never demonstrate against that. All they demonstrate against is Israel, because they're Israel haters. They're not pro-Palestinians. They're doing nothing for the Palestinians by their demonstrations.
So let's have a look now at a very nasty demonstration that took place outside the Shalom Festival last year up in Edinburgh as part of the Edinburgh Fringe.
Jews don't have to support an army whose spiritual leader condones the rape of non-Jewish women to keep up the morale of the troops. Jews don't have to support an apartheid state and developing genocide in Gaza. Sarah Glynn is Jewish and a staunch supporter of Palestinian rights, human and national rights, and other campaigns for social justice. Please give Sarah Glynn a warm platform in strong contrast to the Zionist Jews who support murder of Palestinians. Sarah Glynn.
I want you to look around you and look at this building that we've been standing in front of. This is a festival. Where else in the Edinburgh Festival are there no posters outside? Is there nothing to tell you what's going on?
Yeah, I was there last year up in Edinburgh, so I know what it was like. And inside the Shalom Festival was a celebration of Israeli dance, Israeli artists, Israeli musicians, done in a very peaceful, loving environment, but outside was very hostile and extremely aggressive. And that's the nature of their protests. I mean, I was very disappointed by the fact that they, as walking to the venue, you had to then walk through them all with their horrible chants, like your tickets have blood on your hands and shame on you, and you know, Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, and their usual chants and what have you. I'm just very disappointed the police didn't take action and actually move them away from the actual venue itself.
I think the police were surprised by the aggressive nature of that demonstration. They didn't expect it to be as bad as that. And I think to some extent, once the demonstrators were in place, it was very difficult to move them again, because that would be quite a difficult thing to do. And the result was that women, children, old people were sworn at, they were spat at, they were treated in the most horrific way, that many of them came into the venue crying, because they've never seen anything like it, and they couldn't understand why people who pretend to care about other people would behave in that sort of way. But despite that, we had a very successful Shalom Festival, but it was only one day. This year, it's 3 days. It's 3 days of a Shalom Festival with exhibitors, with films, with theatre, with a concert. And one of the most interesting things is that in 2014, these demonstrators caused the cancellation of a theatre group from Israel called the Incubator Theatre. And after 1 or 2 performances, they were taken off by the Fringe. They've come back to Edinburgh this year, despite what happened 3 days ago, and we're going to show these aggressive, horrific individuals that they will not win. And the theatre group has come back, and they will be playing, and they are playing to houses in the Edinburgh Festival. And this is really annoying the Scottish PSC, because they never thought that would happen. So from 1 day to 3 days, it's a victory as far as we're concerned, and they're losing out.
And also to have the endorsement of the first Scottish minister, Nicola Sturgeon, for the Shalom Festival as well. I mean, that is also a significant breakthrough, isn't it?
Oh no, we've had endorsement from Nicola Sturgeon, we've had an endorsement from Ruth Davidson, we've had an endorsement from Kezia Dugdale. So all 3 leaders of the 3 main political parties have endorsed this festival. Now, what do you think the Israel haters think about that? They're trying to warn the politicians that they're doing something which is going to do them harm, because people will turn against them in the polls and in the elections. They won't, because people want to see reconciliation. People want to see people working together. People want to encourage dialogue and cultural exchanges between Scotland and Israel, and that's exactly what they're getting.
So let's have a look at this trailer that our own Luke Conder produced for the Shalom Festival in 2016.
Hello, my name is Howard Conder, the founder of Revelation TV. I want to add my endorsement to the International Shalom Festival at the Edinburgh Fringe. I personally have a passion and a love for music. In the 1960s, I was a drummer with the legendary band The Baronites and many others as well. So I understand when the Israelis want to come and offer their musical talent to audiences around the world, and in particular at this festival. Sadly, these days many Israeli artists and performers face boycotts and discriminations, and with many Palestinian activists obstructing performances and preventing these talented Israeli shows from being shown. Well, thankfully, the boycotters have not won this time, and we will see Israeli culture come to the streets of Edinburgh. So I encourage you to attend this festival and give your support, because this is an opportunity to build bridges between Britain and Israel. So make sure that you're there. Thank you.
Friends, I'm so happy to be with you today to celebrate with you Israel's participation at the Edinburgh Fringe. It's really great that Israel is being represented at this important international festival. And Israel has so much to share. Our cultural diversity is unique. We are a country with a rich cultural history, going back to the Book of Books. Do you know that Israel has more universities, more translations, more museums per capita than any other country? We have something to say in Israel, and I'm glad that so many of you are eager to listen. So I want to thank all the organizers of this event. I want to thank you all for being part of that and working with the Embassy of Israel on the content. This is really an important contribution to building a bridge between Israel and the United Kingdom. And ultimately, through greater dialogue, through cultural exchange, we're getting to know each other better and also providing a framework for greater coexistence. And that's an important thing. So I thank once again all of you for being involved in this important event. I thank the Friends of Israel in Scotland for being the powerhouse to put it all together. And I hope you all enjoy the Shalom International Fringe event. Thank you.
And it's great that we can celebrate Israeli culture, Israeli art and Israeli music here in Britain, up in Scotland for the Edinburgh Fringe. It's a very powerful way of building bridges, isn't it? Through art and through culture and also through music, even through sport as well, because you know, when Israel played Scotland or they played Wales or they played England, it's an opportunity for our nations to get closer together.
Well, I think that's how people get to meet people from other countries. If you're involved in a cultural exchange or a cultural event, you just talk about other things, not just politics, and you get to know people that way. And that's how you really find out what they think. And when people come to the stall and we talk to them about what's happening in the Middle East, they get to know a little bit more than you'd otherwise know. And it's the same when they go to cultural events. They just meet people from Israel. Israeli people meet people from Glasgow or from Scotland, and they create a really good relationship. And the number of people that come to the stall, and most of them, of course, are Scottish, come back over and over again because they know we have a story to tell. And it's a positive story about peace and reconciliation for both Israeli and the Palestinian people.
Excellent. And Sammy, you've also been very much involved with the work of the Scottish Nationalist Party in building bridges. How has that gone? Because when we saw the previous leader, Alex Salmond, he was very hostile to Israel. So how's the political landscape regarding Israel changing up in Scotland now? I think
people know that traditionally there have been quite a lot of pro-Palestinian people in Scotland. Scotland, to some extent, is more left than the rest of the UK, and left people tend to be more pro-Palestinian than pro-Israel. And the same would happen in the Scottish National Party. And there are very many events that the Scottish National Party have supported in the past that tended to be pro-Palestinian. And I felt, and we felt, that there was no balance within the Scottish National Party, and we wanted to do something about it. So based on advice from a senior SNP individual, I was told the best way to do something about it is to join the SNP, which is exactly what I've done. I've joined the SNP, and with other members of the party, we have established a group called the SNP Friends for Peace in the Middle East. And that's quite a new concept within the Scottish, within the SNP. And we've now attended 2 conferences, party conferences. We attended one last year in Glasgow, and we attended one this year in Aberdeen. And initially, we got a very, very hostile reception. Many people were very angry that we were there, because as far as they were concerned, we weren't there to promote peace. And they tended to point to me as I'm a chair of the Glasgow Friends of Israel, because I'm well known for supporting Israel, and they're saying that the Scottish, the SNP Friends for Peace in the Middle East is just another organisation like Glasgow Friends of Israel. But it's not, because I'm the only person in the organisation that is a member of GFI. Everybody else is not. And we're talking about trying to promote peace within the SNP for the Israeli and Palestinian people. And that's what the message is all about. And people have warmed to that. But on the other hand, people are saying to us sometimes, I really support peace in the Middle East, but I'm afraid to do so openly because I get criticised. And what you have to do within the SNP is explain to people why it's important to support peace for both sides of the conflict.
Absolutely. And what role do you think that dialogue plays in just having an open discussion about Israel's situation in the Middle East? And when they come to know some more of the pressures and the threats facing Israel, do they have a different perception?
I think it's like everybody else that learns more about the situation. They get to know the background, they get to know the history, they get to hear the story from both sides, and they tend to be more balanced about that. Now, some people will remember the Oslo Accord, where Norway acted as a mediator between the Israelis and Palestinians and actually made progress with peace negotiations in the area. It'd be absolutely wonderful if Scotland, which is very similar to Norway and is often compared to Norway, if Scotland could have a leading role in that sort of arena and actually help broker some sort of progress for peace between Israel and the Palestinians. And I think there are people in Scotland who can see that as a possible future action for the Scottish government.
And Prager University has produced this excellent short film asking, why is there not a Palestinian state?
If Israel just allowed the Palestinians to have a state of their own, there would be peace in the Middle East, right? That's what you hear from UN ambassadors, European diplomats, and most college professors. But what if I told you that Israel has already offered the Palestinians a state of their own, and not just once, but on 5 separate occasions? Don't believe me? Let's review the record. After the breakup of the Ottoman Empire following World War I, Britain took control of most of the Middle East, including the area that constitutes modern Israel. 17 years later, in 1936, the Arabs rebelled against the British and against their Jewish neighbors. The British formed a task force, the Peel Commission, to study the cause of the rebellion. The commission concluded that the reason for the violence was that 2 peoples, Jews and Arabs, wanted to govern the same land. The answer, the Peel Commission concluded, would be to create 2 independent states, one for the Jews and one for the Arabs, a 2-state solution. The suggested split was heavily in favor of the Arabs. The British offered them 80% of the disputed territory, the Jews the remaining 20%. Yet, despite the tiny size of their proposed state, the Jews voted to accept this offer, but the Arabs rejected it and resumed their violent rebellion. Rejection number 1. 10 years later, in 1947, the British asked the United Nations to find a new solution to the continuing tensions. Like the Peel Commission, the UN decided that the best way to resolve the conflict was to divide the land. In November 1947, the UN voted to create 2 states. Again, the Jews accepted the offer, and again, the Arabs rejected it. Only this time, they did so by launching an all-out war. Rejection number 2. Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria joined the conflict, but they failed. Israel won the war and got on with the business of building a new nation. Most of the land set aside by the UN for an Arab state, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, became occupied territory, occupied not by Israel, but by Jordan. 20 years later, in 1967, the Arabs, led this time by Egypt and joined by Syria and Jordan, once again sought to destroy the Jewish state. The 1967 conflict, known as the Six-Day War, ended in a stunning victory for Israel. Jerusalem and the West Bank, as well as the area known as the Gaza Strip, fell into Israel's hands. The government split over what to do with this new territory. Half wanted to return the West Bank to Jordan and Gaza to Egypt in exchange for peace. The other half wanted to give it to the region's Arabs, who had begun referring to themselves as the Palestinians in the hope that they would ultimately build their own state there. Neither initiative got very far. A few months later, the Arab League met in Sudan and issued its infamous 3 no's. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiations with Israel. Again, a 2-state solution was dismissed by the Arabs, making this rejection number 3. In 2000, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak met at Camp David with Palestinian Liberation Organization Chairman Yasser Arafat to conclude a new 2-state plan. Barak offered Arafat a Palestinian state in all of Gaza and 94% of the West Bank, with East Jerusalem as its capital. But the Palestinian leader rejected the offer. In the words of U.S. President Bill Clinton, Arafat was here 14 days and said no to everything. Instead, the Palestinians launched a bloody wave of suicide bombings that killed over 1,000 Israelis and maimed thousands more on buses, in wedding halls, and in pizza parlors. Rejection number 4. In 2008, Israel tried yet again. Prime Minister Ehud Olmert went even further than Ehud Barak had, expanding the peace offer to include additional land to sweeten the deal. Like his predecessor, the new Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas, turned the deal down. Rejection number 5. In between these last 2 Israeli offers, Israel unilaterally left Gaza, giving the Palestinians complete control there. Instead of developing this territory for the good of its citizens, the Palestinians turned Gaza into a terrorist base from which they have fired thousands of rockets into Israel. Each time Israel has agreed to a Palestinian state, the Palestinians have rejected the offer, often violently. So if you're interested in peace in the Middle East, maybe the answer is not to pressure Israel to make yet another offer of a state to the Palestinians. Maybe the answer is to pressure the Palestinians to finally accept the existence of a Jewish state. I'm David Bragg, Executive Director of the Maccabee Task Force for Prager University.
There you go. It shows that proof that truth is a very powerful weapon and also very compelling. I think in there that the Dennis Prager film that we just showed shows that really the reason why there's no peace is not Israel's fault.
And this is the kind of information we try and exchange with people when they come to the stall. We give them facts, we give them historical background, we give them information of that kind, and they go away understanding a little bit better what's actually been happening over the last 50 or 60 years. Now, one of the things that I do, I've probably said this before to you, Simon, I was actually born a Palestinian. When I was born in Palestine in 1946. So I'm more Palestinian than many of the people who pretend to be Palestinians and have never been in the region. I have more right, I think, to talk about peace for Palestinians and Israelis than many people that pretend to be caring about the Palestinians. And people get very confused about that when I say that to them, because they think only Arabs can be Palestinians. But that's not the case. There could have been Jewish Palestinians, Christian Palestinians, and of course Arab Palestinians. And everybody should be caring and wanting to see peace for both people in the Middle East.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of other regional groups, there are other regional Israel groups all across the country that have really grown in the last couple of years. How can our viewers get involved with their local representative group, like you're the director of Glasgow Friends of Israel, and there are many others throughout the country? What's the best way to get involved?
Well, there are 12 Friends of Israel groups in Scotland, all over Scotland. Ours, the Glasgow one, tends to be the biggest one and the most active one. And the best way to get in touch with us, if you're in Glasgow, is to come to our stall on a Saturday and just introduce yourself to the group, and we will be welcoming you with open arms. Also, they can contact us through our Facebook page. Now, there's an organization called COFIS, and COFIS stands for the Confederation of Friends of Israel Groups in Scotland, and they've also got an email address and a website, and you can get in touch with COFIS and just tell them where you live and ask if there's a Friends of Israel group in the area, and I'm sure there'll be opportunities to get together with people who have the same kind of ambition to help create peace in the Middle East.
Absolutely. And also credit to people like Ruth Kennedy as well, who's doing a great job with the in encouraging stronger links between Scotland and Israel as well.
Well, there are a number of organisations, including including Ruth's group, who is a sort of interface between the Israeli embassy in Scotland. And one of the things, again, I'd like to mention is that we are all, Glasgow Friends of Israel is accused by our friend Mick, Sick Mick as I call him now, that we are being funded by the Israeli embassy. He couldn't be more wrong. We don't need to be funded by the Israeli embassy. We are funded by people who care, individual donors who are happy to help us and give us funding to do what we're trying to do. And so the work that Ruth does, the work that we do, the work that all the other Friends of Israel groups do in Scotland is making a huge difference. And I think the Israel haters are on the retreat. For the first time in years, they're not getting their own way. They're actually being opposed and they don't like it.
Good to hear. And you also have a conference coming up in December.
Yes, we do. So this will be our third annual conference. We had one last year in the Glasgow Royal Concert Hall, and we will be having another one this year in December. And we would like as many people as possible to come. It's going to be a whole day event on Sunday, the 15th of December, I believe, or maybe the 10th of December. I can't remember the exact date. And it'll be a whole day event with speakers coming from all over the UK. It'll start about 10:30 in the morning and go until 4 o'clock. And we'll be advertising it on our Facebook page, and we will want as many people as possible to come. Now, people didn't think we would make 3 years or even 2 years or even 1 year. And here we are, over 2 years later, planning our third annual conference. It's been a huge success. And the number of people who are supporting us is growing and growing and increasing. And we have a good story to tell. And we are fighting for peace in the Middle East.
Fantastic. And Sammy, what I'm very impressed with as well, hearing about your annual conferences, is that you put on you're Jewish yourself, but you put on a Christian Sunday service for Christians who want to attend the conference.
The Glasgow Friends of Israel is not a religious group. We invite people, we have people of all faiths and none. So there are Jewish people, there are Christian people. And one of the interesting things is when people come to the stall, they say, well, of course you would support Israel, you're Jewish. And I say, yeah, but Alan over there isn't Jewish, and Jean over there isn't Jewish, and Andrew over there is not Jewish, and Christina over there is not Jewish. And they all support Israel and peace in the Middle East. And that's what we do. So for the conference, we will start off with a Christian service, so that people who would normally go to church on a Sunday will be able to come to the conference, attend a church service, and then we will start the conference when that service is over. And the service is taken by one of our members, because we like to try and make it easy for people to come and attend the conference.
Absolutely. So what can we expect in the next coming year in terms of activities? Got about a minute left of the programme.
Well, we hold regular speaking events, so we will try and hold an event every 6 to 8 weeks, and we invite as many people as possible to come and attend those events. We will increase our activity in the street. It'll be great if you could have another stall in Glasgow, and we're looking at potentially doing that. And we'd like to try and do as much as we can to encourage people to come and listen to what we have to say and to learn about what's happening between the Israelis and the Palestinians and how we could together work towards peace rather than hate of Israel as a country.
Sammy, I just want to thank you for being my guest and being back on the Middle East Report. So thank you so much.
I think it's great, Simon. Thank you very much for having me, and I'd like to come back again in the future.
You will do.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to thank you all for watching this programme today. So if you're in Glasgow and you're spending some time there, or even if you live there, go and say hello to Sammy and his team. And it's important that we proclaim the truth about Israel's situation in the Middle East, and that we break down the lies, the misperceptions, the hatred that surrounds the topic of Israel. So it's important that all of us make our stand for Israel, and that we pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And we'll just leave you with this beautiful song that says, I will stand with Israel.